Hi there, and welcome to our first installment of Whisky Investment 101 series. So during this series, what we're going to be doing is talking about all the different aspects of whisky investment, what's trending right now, and just in general, what's what you need to look out for in the whisky industry at this point in time in terms of investment. So the first topic we've decided to go with in the flagship episode of the series is growth of whisky investment in a COVID-19 world. So basically, it's a very current topic at the moment. It's taking over the world. Obviously, there's a lot of places here in Asia of like Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore have gotten better. They've kind of came out of quarantine and lockdown, but a lot of countries over in the West are still going through it. So it is still a very current topic. I'm going to be your speaker today. George Katsakis. I just joined Rare Finds Worldwide as an investment specialist and a marketing director, and I'll be running you through the presentation today that we have on this. So let me just share this screen here. Now, before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about Rare Finds and what exactly we do. So first off, Rare Finds, we're rare whiskey specialists. We have a brokerage. Basically, we work with all our clients in finding them the best and the rarest casks, whiskey casks around. We mainly specialize in casks, and we help all our clients build portfolios. From the brands that they like, from the brands that are trending, finding them the best investment opportunities. We also have a separate whiskey fund that's more hands-off. So it's not so much collectors that build their own cask portfolios. It's more so as a fund would work. You invest and then you get your returns over the years. There's a lot more to that as well, but the way we try to do it at Rare Finds is have an ecosystem that works together. So we have our brokerage where we keep trading the casks and building portfolios. And then when we find some really great ones, we put them into the fund. So that all coexists together. And obviously it gives our clients the best investment opportunities and returns. We have a lot of connections in the industry that go back many decades. We're very close to a lot of brands, a lot of the best suppliers in Scotland. So we are very close to the source. Hence why we try to get our clients the best prices. We also, later on, for the collectors, this is not for the fund, more for the brokerage, if our clients do decide to retrade their casks and build a brand by bottling their casks, we're always there to help in every step of the way. We're like a one-stop all kind of company. A little bit about me. So I'm a writer for Forbes, and I'm on posts in different magazines. I do rare whiskey options. I consult with some brands, some of the brands of some different companies, and that's how I'm collaborating now with Rare Finds. Now let's move on to today's topic. So what we're going to cover today in a nutshell, we're going to talk about COVID-19 and its impact on the global whiskey industry. And to do that, we need to look at the industry as like every aspect of the industry in order to focus more on the rare whiskey sector and whiskey investment. We're going to look at how brands and companies have reacted to COVID and what's changed and how that benefits us as collectors and people that are into whiskey investment, how brand reactions through COVID will benefit us in the long term. And then we're just going to talk more about investment opportunities during COVID. Something I want to touch on is the casks versus bottles, which will be quite an interesting topic to discuss. And then we're just going to talk about historically how whiskey's performed, the economics, how it's grown, whether it's fell or dropped at any point over the last few decades. So we need to see what impact will COVID-19 have. So it's obviously, I discussed, we're not at the end of COVID by far, but there has been a lot of change for the whiskey industry during like the last year that it's been going. Now, the first thing we're going to discuss is not so much about investment, but it's more so how the whiskey industry has been impacted over this last year. So the biggest, I'd say the most affected part of the industry is duty-free. So duty-free in itself in the global whiskey market is seen as a market on its own. So the same way America's a market, Hong Kong's a market, duty-free was a huge, huge market. It's one of the top markets in the world for whiskey. And that has basically just shattered overnight. There's no, barely anyone's flying, therefore no one's buying at airports. whiskey sales are just not, the bottles are just not going to all the airports around the world. So that's really hindered a lot of brands and a lot of newer, smaller brands that managed to get in to these airports. That's hindered them a lot. Product launches have also been affected, whereas in the past, most brands would do like regional and global launches of product. You know, fly in journalists. Me as a journalist, I attended a lot of those. That just doesn't happen anymore. There's none. You can't get people really excited if it's just online, but that's pretty much what the brands have needed to do recently. So there have been fewer product launches just because they can't do it. Socializing, you know, no one's going to bars in some countries. I mean, sure, as I mentioned, some countries are doing great, but some countries are still in lockdown. Bars are not open. Whiskey's not being consumed, and that's also hurting sales for a lot of the distilleries. And last but not least, distillery travel and distillery production. It's like that. Distillery travel is a huge part of the Scotch whisky industry in Scotland. It brings in a lot of revenue. It brings in a lot of business for like small businesses around the distilleries themselves, merchandise, and also distillery production. There's a lot of distilleries that had to work on like skeleton crews because they couldn't have too many people distillery, which also messed up a lot of the schedules and the timelines that they had. So this is just giving you an overall look at kind of some of the different parts of the whiskey industry that have been affected. But on a more positive note, what I've seen during this whole pandemic is that the brands have really gone above and beyond to fight back. So the way COVID has affected them negatively, they've really been thinking outside of the box to try new things, target different markets, different people, different companies, different ideas. And that's something I really like to see because whiskey has been so popular over the last 2 decades and it's grown so rapidly, a lot of brands don't really need to try. So some of the bigger, more popular brands, all they need to do is release a limited release, and they just need to release a limited product of like 200-300 bottles and it will sell out instantly. They don't really need to try. So I'm not saying that COVID happening is a good thing. I'm just saying that the fact that it did happen has made a lot of the brands try new things, open up, and kind of look at different sectors that they didn't even focus on before. So some here in terms of investment, there's been a lot of like one-off auction collaborations between brands and big auction houses. And I know brands didn't do that as much in the past, but recently Dalmore has been working with Sotheby's. They've worked together for some different launches and special auctions. I know William Grant & Sons, that owns Glenfiddich and Balvenie, has worked with whiskeyauctioneer.com on, I think Balvenie launched like a car, and it's like they did a charity auction together. So there's, I think this aspect of one-off releases and charity bottles kind of boosts the collectability of said brands. So that's something that later on down the line, us as collectors, that'll benefit us. One bottle launches, that falls under the same category, charity sales. So we've still seen a lot of like different brands try to like do charity auctions, give all the proceeds go to like a good cause, different bodies, different charities. And in general, it's that new outlook. Like I've seen some brands that collaborate with chefs, they're collaborating with different palates, they're going into different markets. So yeah, it's a really great thing to see in the industry. And I think in the long term, that'll be really beneficial to the whiskey industry as a whole and whiskey investment when it comes to what we're looking at. The second part I've got here is community. So all the brands, because all they have is online, they've really went above and beyond and like building their social media stronger, doing giveaways, collaborations. There's so many webinars and like virtual tastings that have gone nuts. Everybody's on Zoom just tasting whiskeys. There's a really nice, I feel they've went further in building a community through this because everybody's in the same boat, everybody's at home, and the brands have really tried to bring everyone together, boost people's mood. Like back 5 months ago when everybody was in lockdown, it really, they really went above and beyond to make people feel better and do a lot of things together. And, that may not be a direct translation to whiskey investment, but brands that go above and beyond, they really care about their fans, are the kind of brands you do want to collect and you do really end up loving because they really care about their fans. So that's something we've seen from all the brands. Now, focusing and honing in. So we've looked a little bit of how the industry has been affected as a whole, but once we hone in a little bit on the impact COVID has had on whiskey investment. So I wrote an article about Sukhinder Singh. He's the founder of the Whisky Exchange, which is the biggest online retailer of whiskey in the world, and he's also the founder of Whisky.auctions, which is a really big online auction house. So he's in a very good, and he's also one of the biggest collectors in the world. So he's in a very good position to discuss the impact that COVID had, because he's from the online platform, the Whisky Exchange, to the auctions. You know, he sees what's happening and how whiskey's being affected by COVID. And one of the main points he made is that whiskey is not just an investment. It's not stocks. It's not cryptocurrency. It's something that you love. It's something that you're passionate about. Like, some people just go in for the investment, and that's fine. But usually, like more often than not, people who invest in whiskey also love drinking whiskey. They really love the stories behind whiskey. And that's why something like COVID has not impacted whiskey as much as it's impacted the stock market, as much as it's impacted different kinds of investments. Whiskey has remained very, very strong through COVID-19. And that is a fact. Speaking to Sukhinder, he did not see a drop in auctions or sales. He saw sometimes there was just a very steady period. There was some rises. It wasn't rising as fast as it was before, obviously, but it has not dropped. People are still buying the bottles that they've been looking for. They still want those bottles. The fact that everybody's at home makes people go on online auctions more and scrolling, putting your bids in while everybody was at home in lockdown. I did discuss before the auction collaboration, so that's boosted the industry as well. A lot of the auctions, the big auction houses are doing online auctions, and they're doing all these cool collaborations with different brands and releasing different products. So that's kept the industry going. And there's always things on the news. There's always new products coming out. So, some auction house or another will be working with a brand, and that keeps things very fresh. Personally, like us at Rare Finds, we see the online trades are still strong. And the main thing that we have noticed, and I've noticed, is the casks, the growth of cask sales has been very, very strong. And that's something that we're going to discuss later on as to why that happened. But I do, from what I've seen, because doing the auctions that I do in Hong Kong, the online auctions and trading casks, I have seen a big, big boost for casks, whereas bottles are a bit harder nowadays. But we'll discuss that in a minute why. But you can see some figures here from the Global Single Malt Whiskey Market Research. Whiskey is still projected to rise by 4% annually. Obviously, before COVID, that was much higher, but also we need to keep in mind that after COVID, that will be much higher again, because there'll be everybody will be free, everybody will have a much better mood, everything will open up again, and whiskey is expected to rise. But even through COVID, it's expected to keep rising by 4% annually. Something that we've found from our market research and analysis and our personal our brokerage in the fund, we've seen that whiskey sales have continued to grow by 10% monthly, even in 2020. Whereas in 2019, it was even less. So that's something that whiskey cask sales have grown by 10% monthly in 2020, more than last year. So that just goes to show that even with COVID, it's not been impacted, it's only grown. And now we'll discuss why that is. So casks versus bottles. So in a COVID-19 world, why are casks selling more than bottles? Why are casks growing faster than bottles? Because just to think about it very plainly, you want to collect a bottle, you're buying it you're in Hong Kong and you want to buy it from the UK. Things are much harder now. Things are harder to ship. Things are harder to they take much longer. Customs are stricter now. And when you have really, really rare bottles, there's more risk involved when you ship it. And in general, I know for a fact before, when people were trading really rare bottles, you'd want to grab that bottle and put it in your suitcase, or put it in a box and take it with you. But no one's traveling. And that's legal. You are allowed one liter of alcohol coming through the airport. So people would get really rare bottles and fly them to their customers. They can't do that anymore. So it's became the whole logistics side of things. It became way more complicated. But when you look at casks, that doesn't exist. So if you look here with casks, there's a lot of different steps to buying your cask. But the way it works is, say you're working with Rare Finds, you get your offer, they tell you what's going right now and what's the best thing. You choose your cask, you pay your deposit, you get the details, you pay the full amount of the cask, and you get all the documentation and everything you need to prove that that cask is yours. But the cask remains in Scotland. It remains in a bonded warehouse, like a government regulated bonded warehouse. So that needs to be clear that it's not just Rare Finds or any other cask sellers. It is regulated by the government, and it's very closely regulated because Scotch whisky is such a huge market. It's such a huge like market and part of the UK economy that they are very, very strict and regulate it very closely. So something that you have immediately is you have security in these bonded warehouses. It's easy. You don't have to, as I said, it's paperwork. You have all the proof and documentation that this cask belongs to you, but there's nothing being shipped. You don't have to receive any bottles. Nothing needs to be shipped to you. There's, nothing that you have to do with bottles. You don't have to store it. Like even when you have bottles, you have to store them in like a cool, like you can't have them like in front of the sun or anything like that. You need to keep them in the shelf. You need to tilt them regularly. I mean, don't get me wrong. I collect bottles as well, but I'm just trying to explain why during COVID casks have taken off even more. Now, another aspect, this is not just COVID related, but the fact that it's a tangible asset and the fact that when a whiskey gets put in a bottle, it doesn't age anymore. So say you put the whiskey in this bottle when it's a 10-year-old whiskey, it will always be like in 20 years, this will still be a 10-year-old whiskey. But casks don't have that. Casks continue to age within the oak. So then you have two ways of your investment growing. You have the brand in question will keep rising, becoming more popular, and thus your cask will become more valuable. Then you have the age, so it continues to mature. So say the brand stays here and it doesn't get popular, which probably won't happen, but say it does, it's still becoming older. So that 5-year-old whiskey in 5 years time, it's a 10-year-old whiskey and it's worth way, way more. So the fact that you've got these two ways that your investment will rise is another like really appealing part of casks. And the fact that historically casks, that goes with the point underneath, like undiscovered bottles, they haven't reached their peak. Like the world record keeps going up, but it's a much more competitive market. Everybody's collecting, everybody's searching for this. Prices are rising because everybody wants it. There's so much demand and there's not enough supply. So prices keep going nuts. But in terms of cask, it's still quite undiscovered. It's still, even people who hear about it don't know enough about it or don't learn enough about it to really trust it. Because as something that the ease of getting it in the paperwork, that might put some people off because they're like, oh, I can't hold it the way you'd hold a bottle, when that's not really an issue. But it's still a very undiscovered asset. So that puts us ahead of the game, that we're still at the front lines, and we've just started. And it's not just started, but it's still not as near where bottles are. So there's still a lot of room for growth until it becomes, like I estimate in 5 years time, the casks will be huge. The prices will have gone nuts, but we got in now. So we are obviously ahead of the game, and that's a very important part of whiskey casks. Yeah, I got this little graph here, just pinpointing maturation, how important that is. So yeah, so we've discussed the sectors of the whiskey industry in general. We've talked about investment during COVID. We've talked about casks, but then now you might be at the point where you're like, well, what cask do I buy? Now, this is something obviously any company you buy a cask with will help you from. Like we help you here at Rare Finds. We take you through every process. We tell you exactly what brand you should invest in and why, and we explain the reasons to it. It's not just like a blind recommendation. And we want to just explain a little bit about how the thought process works. So the way you see how investable a brand is, you look first off at the size and the budget. Now, it doesn't need to be a huge distillery, but if you look at a distillery that's just been bought by Diageo, or Glen Roast that's been bought by, that's owned by Edrington now, who owns in Macallan and Highland Park, that gives you a lot of confidence, because there's a huge marketing budget behind it. It's a big company. And they're not planning to just let the brand, they're going to really push the brand and make it grow. Then the second one, you look at their business model, and that comes into the branding and the mission as well. It's what does this brand want? Does it want to stay small, boutique, have a very like close fan base? Like some distilleries that do that is Springbank is like that Daft Milk that started just like a few years ago, 10 years ago. They have like a small cult following, but they become really collectible. Or is the business model to be a global giant like the Macallan, like be all everywhere, any bar, any store, and like promote a luxury lifestyle? So this is all things you need to consider when you're going to invest in your, like what is this brand going for? What's their mission? What's their branding? And is it worth the investment? Then you look at room for growth. So the easiest way to look at this is say the Macallan is the best-selling, most popular, most collected whiskey in the world right now. So it doesn't have as much room for growth as a small up-and-coming brand will. And the only thing that will affect you is you could invest in Macallan and you'll probably trade it faster. If you get a smaller brand that's in the up-and-coming, you'll hold it for a longer amount of time and then trade it. So that's, again, just something you need to consider when you're going to choose a brand. Do you want to like wait a longer time? Do you want to do short-term investment, long-term investment? That all comes into it. And last but not least, it's a collectability. So something I like to say that even if you do all the other points we just mentioned, if a bottle or a brand it doesn't look cool, they've not gotten the branding right. They've just not. Some brands just blow up just because they got the story, the concept, the bottle shape, and the branding. They got all of it aligned, and that's why they blow up. It's not because they're huge or they have huge budgets. So end of the day, is the brand, is a sexy brand, is a collectible brand? That's one of the biggest things you should look at when you're considering what kind of brand to invest in. I just an overlook, just looking a little bit of how we do it and how our thought process works when we're recommending brands to our clients. So here, before we close off, we're just giving you a few recommendations. So the blue chips are like the really big brands, the really popular brands, some of the most collectible brands in the world. The front runners are ones that are rising quick. They're getting very, very popular. They already are very popular, but they still have more room for growth than the big blue chips that have like pretty much hit the top. Solid and Strong is, I'd say, just below the front runners. They've been getting very, very popular in recent years, but they're not yet at those crazy, crazy price tags. So these are still like quite affordable. If you just want to dip your toe into cask investment and just start buying some cask, these are some really good brands to go for. If you don't want to pay the really, really big bucks, they obviously will have bigger returns later on, but if you just want to dip your toe, those are really good brands. And then the rising stars are even like below the Solid and Strong. These are brands that are showing a lot of promise, are doing everything we discussed before, and like what makes a brand investable. They're doing everything right, but they're still not there yet. They're still growing and growing, and there's a lot of room for growth in those. And you can get casks, very affordable casks of these brands that are expected to grow a lot in the next 10 years. So that's just a few brands that you can consider, have a look at. And then if obviously it goes without saying, if anyone has any questions for us, feel free to get in touch and we'll give you more specific recommendations as well. So here's just a little, I already discussed what Rare Finds does, but just if you do buy a cask, like some little details that you might want to know, that the cask is held at a bonded warehouse, as I said, like it's government regulated, and it can get bottled there. So if you do decide to make your own brand, you can bottle it there. You can get your samples drawn of your cask. You can actually visit your cask in Scotland when, like, hopefully COVID's done and everything opens up. You can actually go visit your casks. Re-racking, that's a bit more complicated, but that just means you can move your whiskey into a more premium type of wood that will make it rise in value in a sense. But that's a whole webinar on its own. And then the annual regauge, that just shows you basically whiskey evaporates from your cask every year. So the annual regauge is just show you the level, like how much is evaporated from your cask. It happens with all casks. And it's usually like around 3% a year if it's a colder climate. Yep, and then you have the storage cost, insurance, so you don't have to really worry about the risks of your cask leaking or anything, because you have like insurance attached to it. Yeah, so that's everything from me today. And yeah, now you can ask any questions. If you have anything to ask, feel free, any questions at all. And if you do have like more questions later that you can't think of right now, just feel free to email us. We've got the information there information at rarefindsworldwide.com. The website, you can contact us through there as well. Yeah, so thank you for listening, and yeah, anybody has any questions? Nothing yet. Guess that means I covered everything. Nope, no questions. Okay, then I will close this off if no one has anything in a few minutes. Thanks for watching. Sorry we started a little bit late because yeah, we had been having technical difficulties all day with the webinars. Oh, here's a question here. How long should we keep a bottle after purchase? A bottle? That really, that depends. Like, it just depends how rare. Do you mean like if you buy like a rare bottle of whiskey, how long should you hold it before you retrade it? Or, okay, well, it just depends on the bottle, really. It really depends on the age, the rarity of it. Some bottles you can buy, like if you get it for a good price, you can, like, a lot of people, that's what you call a bottle flipper. So they just buy them and flip them, sell them right away. But I'd say if you buy a nice rare bottle, I'd say like you could wait a year, a few years, give yourself a year or 2 year mark before you go out and retrade it, and then odds are it will have grown if it is already popular at the time that you buy it. I'd say 1 or 2 years if you're not in a rush. But it always just depends, you know. Like if you are working with different companies like us or any other trader, they can even like tell you when the best time to trade your bottle is. But a good thing, just a good, like, if you're not that involved in the industry, a year would be fine. A year or 2. Yep. Oh wait, one more. Yeah, no worries. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching and joining. As I said, I'm sorry we started a little bit late. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you in our next installment of Whiskey Investment 101. Have a nice day.